So Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams is on a mission to tackle one of the most stubborn health problems in the country, chronic disease in the African-American community. A police officer for more than 2 decades, Adams was a connoisseur of the fast food dollar menu. Fast food was easy, cheap, and comfortable. His diet followed him from the squad car to the state Senate and then to Brooklyn Borough Hall, where it finally caught up with him. But Adams was not ready to become a statistic. There was a better option besides medication and shots of insulin: food. He is the author of Healthy at Last, a plant-based approach to preventing and reversing diabetes and other chronic illnesses. With this book, Adams shows readers how to avoid processed food, cut down on salt, get more fiber, and substitute beef, chicken, pork, and dairy with delicious plant-based alternatives. So without further ado, Mr. Adams, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for just allowing me the opportunity to share my journey. And none of the proceeds from the book will go to me. It actually, the dollars are going to go to a nonprofit to really help people find the freedom of a healthy lifestyle. And this journey was an amazing journey. And I remember as a child, my mother planting a seed in me that stated, baby, just because you are in a dark place, it does not mean you are buried. In fact, it means that you could be planted and you would make the determination of the two. And so the book is really they are the fruits of my harvest from that planting. I woke up one day almost 4.5, 5 years ago, not able to see the alarm clock. I thought it was sleep in my eyes. I was blinking my eyes and it didn't clear up. And my left eye, the vision was just about gone. And at the same time, I was having discomfort in my stomach that I thought it was colon cancer because I lost a good friend and the symptoms were the same. It wasn't gas-like, it wasn't moving around. It was just stationary. And it just felt like a knot. And I decided to go to the doctor. You know, men, you have to drag us to the doctors, kicking and screaming. And finally I got there and he put me under sedation to check my stomach and my colon. And when I came out, he stated that, Eric, your colon is fine, you have an ulcer, but your real problem is your diabetes. That's the vision loss you are experiencing and the tingling in your hands and feet. That is permanent nerve damage. It's going to eventually lead to amputation and you're going to eventually lose your sight. He said, your blood pressure is high, your cholesterol is high. I just had the American package. And, it was really just alarming. I walked into the doctor's office with no medicine. And I was leaving that day with insulin and 2 other forms of medicine for my diabetes, some drops to slow down my vision loss, high blood pressure pills, cholesterol pills. I was like the Dwayne Reed. I came out with so many different prescriptions and medicine. And I recall going to 5 of the best doctors in this city. And they all told me the same thing. They said, Eric, it's hereditary. Your mother is diabetic. She was diabetic for 12 years, 7 years on insulin. My dad just transitioned from prostate cancer. My brothers and sisters were dealing with real chronic diseases. My sister lost a kidney to diabetes. And it was just part of the family. And you basically feel sometimes, this is just the way it is. You get older and you get these different chronic diseases. But life is funny. And I sat down at the computer that day with all of these pamphlets of saying living with diabetes. And I typed in one word different. I typed in reversing diabetes. And all of this information came up. And I started reading it and I was like, what is this? What is this reversing chronic diseases? Dr. Greger, Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Barnard, and so many others. And I called Dr. Esselstyn. He was in Ohio, Cleveland Clinic. And I told him who I was. And I said, I just read this stuff about reversing heart disease. And, is this true? Actually, when I called him, I thought I was going to get some comedy show or something, because I said, this can't be real. And he says, fly out to see me. I took a flight out and I went to see him in Cleveland, Ohio. And he gave me this conversation and lecture on, food and how food is medicine. And I remember him saying that I had to give up certain foods. And I was like, what is wrong with this guy? I'm losing my sight. And he's telling me to give up fried chicken. What type of, quack is this? But I had nothing to lose. And I returned to the city and started to throw out the things in my cupboard. And I started to read the labels. And I said, wow, this is exactly what he was talking about. I was not eating food. I was eating food-like substance. And the body's like a machine. It needs the right things to operate. And I just dove straight in and went whole food, plant-based. And let me tell you, that first week, I was such a terrible cook. My best meal was French toast, and I would burn that half the time. But at the end of the week, I used to make this cereal made out of flax seeds, and I forgot to grind the flax seeds in the process, so it was just awful. And that Sunday, I sat there almost in a state of depression because I stated that I was at a crossroad. Either I would continue to eat the food that I was eating and go down the pathway of my mom and my dad, or I would make the transition. And I just felt like, instead of saying, woe is me, why not say, why not me? And I started to just learn different meals and practice and cook different things and building out a different repertoire. And I was able to just start creating some great meals. And within 3 weeks, my vision came back. Within 3 months, my nerve damage went away, my diabetes went in remission. And that ulcer that sent me to the doctors in the first place, that probably saved my life, I didn't even realize when it went away. I just noticed one day I was no longer feeling the pain in my stomach. No medicine, only the original medicine, food. And it's just, there was something that I felt that, wow, we're betraying Americans. Because the chronic disease hijacks your life. You're no longer yourself. You're thinking about that next test. You're watching your family members slowly erode into the person they no longer were at the time. And it just became a mission for me. And I remember that feeling of, I'm going to dedicate my life to help families, to see that there's another way. We've just betrayed Americans. And it's really alarming that our leaders are allowing so many Americans to have their lives devastated like this. Our sick care, not health care, our sick care system is not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. We can't continue to treat symptoms. It's time to allow people to have the opportunity and choices. And so those of you who are thinking about plant-based, and sometimes we are abusive to ourselves, think about the desire to walk down the aisle with your grandchild. Think about the desire to not be a burden on your spouse or your mates or your children. Think about the opportunities of just a healthy life. You owe it to yourself, but you also owe it to the people around you who are caregivers every day and have to put their lives on hold because of the decisions we made. Life has never given us immortality. We're all going to transition one day. So it's not about living forever, but it's about having a qualitative life while you are alive. And as one person stated, I don't mind dying. I just don't want to do it at my hands. And so thank you for allowing me to come on. I look forward to a lively discussion with you.
Wonderful. Thank you, first of all, Mr. Adams, for joining us today. And thank you so much for sharing your story. It's remarkable. Did you, when you first felt that morning and you couldn't see, had that come out of nowhere? Was that something that you had felt coming on? And as a sort of, look, you were a guy on the police force. Men generally can be more stoic about these things. Were these things building? Was it a storm building in you and just one day the dam cracked? Or is this something that truly just came out of nowhere?
And that's a great question. The tingling, I just felt as though my hands were falling asleep. You know, that little tingling you get when you sit on your hands or something. So I thought it was just my hands falling asleep, and I would shake it off. And just the lethargic feeling that I was going through, I just said, well, you know what, you're getting older, and this is part of getting older. And the vision loss, if it was gradual, I didn't know it. I just remember waking up that day and couldn't see out of my left eye. So I'm not sure of when the vision loss took place, but all of the other symptoms, I was ignoring them. And, you know, men, you know, just really suck it up. It's part of, you know, you're just a little slower. And that is what is amazing, that how much that myth is wrong. You know, you don't slow down with age. You know, that is just not true. I have never felt better. And the level of clarity in my mind and the level of patience that I have, you know, I'm so focused now. And this is just an amazing journey. And I said to myself when I transitioned, wow, where have you been all my life? You know, you know, just you want to fall in love again? You can fall in love again with yourself.
That's exciting. What had been your medical care up to that time? Is this a conversation that had been ongoing with your doctor? Had your doctor been saying to you, you know, there are some lifestyle changes I'd like you to make?
And you know, that is so amazing. And I think the Shakespearean tragedy in our country is what we are doing to healthcare professionals. Mm-hmm. Those little boys and girls that grew up to be men who practice on their cats or their brothers and sisters, hoping one day they will heal, but they're going through PTSD. Imagine someone walking into your office and they're pre-diabetic, and you know eventually they're going to become diabetic, they're going to go through dialysis, they're going to lose their sight, they may even have amputation. You know it. And no one told you the ability to heal. So my doctors just basically started from a prescription pad. Mm-hmm. And the direction was, you know, eventually you're going to need medicine. They didn't know how to give me the proper instruction because they were never given the proper instructions. Mm-hmm. And that's why the big fight of the meat, dairy, and pharmaceutical industry, they are really holding back the true medicine and how to heal. I mean, think about it. Back in Greek days, the father of modern medicine said it, let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food. How did we go wrong all of these years?
That's what's so interesting. And I think you probably see it from working in a governmental perspective, is how the systems are aligned for these poorer outcomes. And that communities, wealthy communities, poorer communities, communities in between, the systems of big business, whether it's, as you mentioned, meat, dairy industry, big pharma, they're aligned to almost meat and dairy are kind of creating customers for pharma. It's this system where they're funneling patients into this pill prescription, whereas we could have a food system that if it were healthier, we wouldn't be creating these kinds of problems.
Well said, well said. And the real tragedy here is the connectivity of it. Mm-hmm. Because what we are doing to our mothers, we're also doing to Mother Earth. Mm-hmm. Our overconsumption of meat, dairy, and animal products, that overconsumption is destroying our planet. When we talk about the destruction of our planet, we're talking about how we are destroying the Amazon so we can have chicken feed, mm-hmm. How the waste from animals really create much of the greenhouse gases. And so there's a holistic approach to this. If we want to improve our environment and have a planet that our children could enjoy, it really starts with improving the diets and giving our children the food that they can enjoy.
You know, I want to switch it a little bit, because from the systems to the personal, food is such a personal thing for people. And they take such great comfort in it, and there's a lot of social aspects to it, and there's a real lifestyle associated for people with food. And there's a perception that if you switch your diet to healthier options or a different kind of lifestyle, that you're removing yourself from your social hierarchy, from the people around you, that you've turned your back on the way we all eat and the way we all socialize. And is that something that you faced, and how did you overcome that?
That is so true. It's amazing, particularly in some of the various ethnic communities and culture communities. Because if you are Italian, how dare you go into that house and say you're not going to have grandma's meatballs,
Right.
you know, or her special pasta, you know. If you are a Caribbean, you know, you start talking about not eating jerk chicken. Or, you know, when I visit my Chinese friends and they talk about, you know, what do you're not going to eat Peking duck? What's wrong with you? Or African Americans, you know, you're too good to eat this food. And so it is a real a sensitive topic, because remember, whenever I had a bad day as a little league baseball player, my dad used to give me special cupcakes filled with sugar and cream. So
Sure.
I identify love through those cupcakes. And so now when someone would have come to me and say, listen, you can't eat those cupcakes anymore, I probably would have socked them in the nose and said, how you insult my dad? And so we identify food not only with what we put in our mouths, but it's really how we identify ourselves. It is how we love, how we nurture, how we care for each other. And so we have to be extremely careful when we start talking about changing diets, because not only does it deal with our physical body, it deals with our spiritual anatomy.
Mhm.
And what I like to show people, here's how you have those culturally sensitive or culturally great foods, culturally sensitive foods, by eating it in a healthier version. You can have a taco with 100% whole wheat flour and using beans and using tofu. So there's so many meals. Like I have this amazing 3 ingredients ice cream that's in my book, Healthy at Last. It's my comfort food: frozen bananas, fresh made peanut butter, and cacao powder. And sometimes I'll throw in some blueberries. And trust me, you won't tell the difference. But part of the conversation is not to beat people up. I don't take people where I am. I meet them where they are, and I take them where they ought to be. And I'm extremely sensitive that food is like a drug. It's addictive. You try taking someone that's hooked on fried this, sugary this, greasy that, take it away from them and have them sit next to someone that's hooked on some opioid. I challenge you to find out who's hooked on the opioid and who's hooked on the bad food. Those
Right.
withdrawals are the same.
No, I think that's so true. And I always wonder why that dynamic wasn't flipped. You know, that idea that you're insulting me by not eating this food, but it's never, well, why are you trying to kill me?
So Jon, can I jump in real quick and
Yes,
say
please.
one of the questions in the chat, this is interesting to me because, you know, we talk about having the privilege to sort of jump out of social situations, but there's a teacher in the group that she works at a public school, and it sort of makes her stomach hurt every day when she sees what the kids are fed. And they're a captive audience that really don't have the choice to jump out of the situation. And so she's asking, do you have any recommendations and how a lowly teacher could affect change in this situation?
Courtney, that teacher, I just love that question. Think about this, and it gives me chills right now as I dug into this, how dysfunctional we are as a country and a city. Think about this for a moment. Who goes to the government and say, I need you to feed me because I can't afford to feed myself? Poor people. They rely on the government to feed them. And when you go to schools, our babies are relying on our schools, particularly when you're in communities that you can't bring your own food or you can't go out to lunch because you don't have the money. So here's the tragedy of this moment. We have a Department of Health and Mental Hygiene that is spending millions of dollars to fight childhood obesity, diabetes, and asthma. Yet every day we're feeding our babies 960,000 meals. And those meals cause what? Childhood obesity, childhood diabetes, childhood asthma. You have people who are incarcerated. They can only get their 3 meals a day from what they're fed by the correctional facilities. The foods are unhealthy. They leave the facilities with all sorts of chronic diseases. People who are homeless, they're fed by homeless shelters. What are they getting? They're getting food that already aggravates their conditions. So we are feeding the healthcare crisis in our country. We did the same thing when COVID hit our country. We were giving people food that aggravated their pre-existing conditions. And 90% of the people who died from COVID had pre-existing conditions. And so on the school question, start a revolution with your students. Start doing videos of What the Health, Forks Over Knives, all of these different programs to let your students push the movement. Educate them, and they are going to start to energize like you've never seen before. We were able to get Meatless Mondays in our school because the young people were saying, we want to be fed better and we want to improve our environment. We were able to get the city to stop serving processed meat, a type 1 carcinogen, because of the young people and their movement. If we want to turn this around, we can't go to young people and say, you can't eat that. We should go to them, educate them, and say, look at what you're eating, you make the decision. And their mere rebellious nature is going to say, you can't feed me this poison anymore, and you'll turn around your schools overnight.
I'm going out right now. I'm going to get more, I'm going to have more kids just so I can get in there and sorry.
I think you have to get an agreement from your wife.
You're probably
Someone else.
But you bring up a really interesting point, which is communities that are already under pressure, financially, institutionally, all these other areas are the ones that are most struggling with these lack of options or being forced to take items that continue to feed these chronic diseases. And so it's a vicious spiral.
It is.
And when we try and get out, I remember when they tried a healthy food initiative in the schools during the Obama administration, boy, you'd have thought they were dragging people out into the streets and beating them. It was such an outcry. And why is it so difficult to make that change from an institutional level?
The accuracy is really profound. And this is what we have failed to do. We need to sit down and let Ms. Jones know, you know that asthma that your baby is having? You know that lethargic feeling, you know that the diabetes, you know those things? Let me now show you the connections, because we don't know. I didn't know. I almost laughed at the doctor when he said that, listen, your vision loss is due to what you were eating. That was just far-fetched. And so what do we want to do? We want to empower the places that people go to for faith. We want to empower our synagogues, our churches, our mosques, our temples, and we want to encourage them to really engage those who are looking for, when you're praying and when you are meditating. And then we want to really hold social groups, our fraternities, our sororities, our Masonic temples, all of these organizations that bring us together, because there must be a movement, not a moment, of stating we have to reclaim our families again. And Ms. Jones has no idea that pizza she's serving her baby is going to not only impact on him physically, but it's also going to impact on the long term on his grades, his ability to have a qualitative life. We have not carried out the right connection to show what food is doing to us. So there has to be a real education to parents, to students, and to agencies. You want to see some of the greatest pushback? Go to some of these agencies. They are unbelievable and getting in the way. And I'm really pleased on what you're doing over at Brookdale. Thank you for that. That's one of our fine institutions in Brooklyn. and let's continue to do so. I'm sorry, I knew there was a question.
Dr. Penn.
Dr. Penn.
Yeah, no, that's all right. So thank you. First of all, thank you, Mr. Adams, for being here this evening. And, as a medical doctor who did seek nutritional training, and no, it wasn't in medical school. That's absolutely true. And it's very sad. It's almost criminal that we don't get that kind of training in medical school. I am just, really 100% behind what you're saying, what's been going on with lunch break and the total wellness community, what's happening at Brookdale Community College and their effort to pull together a wellness center. And I'm just wondering, what are the opportunities for collaboration cross-regionally, across these states, and really bringing total wellness communities across the United States, because food is medicine, and the education that you're talking about is going to literally change the trajectory of the fate of this country. And it is going to start with this kind of education and this kind of radical self-care and truth-telling about the food industry and how we should be eating.
I love that. And that's a powerful question. That's what the book Healthy at Last is about. Because, when I switched to plant-based, I would sit down with friends and they say, oh, well, you think you white now? This is a white thing, and I wanted to show my dashiki wearing, proud Afro wearing Black folks, let's check out where the food you're eating has actually come from. And I wanted to show them the slave connection. The food that your ancestors were forced to eat, now you turn it into a delicacy. And when people started having that aha moment, if we want to talk about Black Lives Matter, it's not only the police, it is the large number of medical institutions that are butchering our mothers and our aunties and our children. And so we need to change the conversation and then start a movement towards that conversation, and then collaborate. You're right. Coming together with different groups and organizations, because there's a real energy. Down in Atlanta, there's a whole Black vegan movement taking place. We need to make healthy food cool. When Beyonce talked about being vegan, the information and the Google searches went through the roof. We need to look at credible messengers. Who are the individuals that people are seeking their guidance from right now? And we need to use all those methods of communications to get to Malcolm Gladwell's definition of a tipping point. And once that happens, once it becomes cool, once it becomes hip, once people start saying, wait a minute, I was duped into eating this food. And once people start to do some of the things we are doing in Brooklyn, we built out, I put millions of dollars into vertical farms, into showing children how to do soilless farming, the jobs that are attached to it, and building nutrition into our educational system. We have to get off the peripheral. It's going to take real visionaries to collaborate. We put out a report when I first talked about it, of an agrarian economy. People laughed at me, they rolled their eyes. And then we put out the report with NYU School of Business and Cornell University. They went from rolling their eyes to focusing their eyes. And they said, wait a minute, this guy's onto something. So this is a Steve Jobs moment. All those folks that are still using Walkmans, that's over. We headed to the iPod age.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Penn. Mr. Adams, you bring up a really interesting point. And all the things that you're talking about are, bringing this to communities of faith, or bringing it to your PTA, or bringing it. And I think one of the difficulties we have is that the corporate power that's wielded in this country is so overwhelming. The truth is, it's easier to eat the bad food that they want you to eat than the good food that will heal you. And until we can also bring corporate power into the equation to create the kind of ease of eating and ease of healthy eating that can really help families nourish themselves. It seems like it's going to be more difficult because the prevailing weight of all of their efforts is into the ease and simplicity of terrible food for you. And how do you battle that? And how do you bring corporate power to bear on that?
I love that. I love that because you're right. And we are at, I believe, a pivotal moment. I think, COVID has been devastating, painful, and really impacted us in so many different ways. But it also is forcing us to re-examine ourselves. Our healthcare system is not sustainable. You can't have 74, 84 million Americans pre-diabetic, 40 million plus diabetic, leading cause of blindness, leading cause of non-trauma limb amputation, one of the leading contributors to kidney failure. This is not sustainable. I mean, the cost of this system is going to collapse. And not even looking at the productivity costs, the trauma to families. And so this is a real opportunity for us to, number one, make upfront investments. We need to zero in on all of our culinary institutions to really focus on making good tasting, healthy food. The Creator gave us a palate for a reason to continue to excite us to eat. And we need to really come up with great ways of making healthy food so that people can start enjoying healthy food in a real way. And then you're seeing a lot of restaurants and fast food establishments are now starting to open that gives you healthy food in plant-based food. So the more we invest in it, the more it's going to produce a qualitative product that people are going to enjoy. And we need to match that with the education and the product continue to expand. Now, I'm not talking about some of these products that are on the market. They're just as unhealthy as you might as well just go and eat that unhealthy food. But I'm talking about good, healthy food, like my 3 ingredients ice cream, or this amazing pasta that I make with lentil pasta, 100% plant-based, or making a great a smoothie or great sweet potato cornbread. I mean, you look at my book and you look at the recipes inside. I tell everyone, go to the recipes first, because then you're going to say, wait a minute, I can eat these great meals, So it's really about investing into healthy food that tastes good. Food should look good, it should taste good, and it should be good. You take one of those out of the equation, you're not going to keep people where they ought to be. Some of us are self-motivating, but the reality is many of us look for instant results, and we need to satisfy those 3 needs for them.
Did you ever, have you had moments on the journey? And you said it's now been about almost, I guess, 5 years, you're saying.
Yes.
Do you have moments of, do you have a sponsor in the healthy eating world? Do you have somebody that you call and go, man, I'm feeling cheeseburger today. Gotta talk me down. Are there those moments that you find yourself?
Yes, and it's all right. It's all right. I don't beat myself up. You know what, Eric? You should not have eaten that lamb chop. So what? You know what? I did it. A beautiful tomorrow is on the horizon. And life is not what you do and stumble, is how you walk the majority of the journey. There's nothing wrong with stumbling. There's nothing wrong with falling. Get right back up. There's another tomorrow. Don't build your life around stumbling. Build your life around, I'm going to walk in the right direction. And so those bad days, I'm sitting somewhere, I'm at an auntie's house, and she says, boy, you better take a piece of that cake. Auntie, I'm gonna take the cake.
We just can't thank you enough. The conversation is, on a personal level, it's so inspiring to hear you talk about it, but also on a professional level, I think you really have such a great grasp of the systems that have corrupted our food industry and have put their tentacles through every part of our society, that you're really very well positioned to understand it in a very special way. So we thank you so much for sharing those insights with us.
Thank you. And just let me say this, Tracy and John and everyone that's here. It's more than the food. You know, we just have been betrayed. We've been betrayed. We've been betrayed in educating our children to say that education is K through 12 when it's not. The first classroom is in a mother's womb, and our mother needs everything she needs to have that baby be prepared. We've been betrayed in dealing with homelessness. We've been betrayed in dealing with how we end inequalities in our city, in our country. We're just ready for a new America. We're ready for America where we don't have to have haves and have-nots. This is just a place with so much prosperity, but so many people have been left behind. And so food is just one of the examples. It's probably one of the most important examples because of the inequities in healthcare and the ability to function. But when we sit down and do a real reflection on who we are as human beings, we realize that we've betrayed our country. And I think we're just ready to have our country become what we know it could become. And so I thank you for allowing me to come on and talk with you. And I just know at the heart of everything I do, I just believe, I believe.
Well, thank you so much for
Thank
incredibly
you.
thoughtful and inspiring evening. And we can't thank you enough. And I know you're incredibly busy, so you can now go to your next meeting. I'm assuming you have it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adams. Take care.
That was great.